Okay, it has been quite a while, about 4 months I believe, since I have given you an update on Jackson. We have his one-on-one aide. Her name is Marta Perez, and she is one of the most fabulous people I have ever met. She is so great with Jackson, and she treats Jackson like she would treat one of her own children. So she is basically his school mom, and I love that. She keeps me updated on basically everything that goes on with him, bothers him, when he does great. I didn't know this until I asked semi-recently. He works every day to meet a goal, which is usually being not aggressive with the other kids, so hands to himself. And she, like, the tokens that she uses and the rewards that she uses, like he loves moon sand, she buys those out of her own pocket. So when she bought the moon sand, basically he works toward this goal. When he meets this goal, he gets to play with moon sand for 10 minutes at the end of the day. And she bought the moon sand with her own money, which I am going to reimburse her for. But that's just the kind of thing, and I wouldn't have known had I not asked. So she is just completely fantastic. I love her to death. Oh, baby's going to be right back. So she is fantastic. He had a honeymoon period when she first started of 2 weeks where he basically had perfect behavior, and then the behavior started coming up. Well, I found out in, I believe, March, that there's this teacher at school that he is terrified of. I had heard a little bit about it before, but it really started being a problem in March. And I found out about it because there was a day where Jackson's aide, Marta, and his teacher, Angela, were both out for the day. They couldn't get a sub aide for Jackson, but it was a substitute teacher that he knew, and she always subbed. Well, found out about a week later from Marta that day that both she and the teacher were out, this teacher that Jackson is terrified of, her name is Mrs. Moore, he is terrified of, took it upon herself, because she knew that he didn't have an aide that day, to pull him into her room. She's a kindergarten teacher next door, and he is so terrified of her that because she pulled him into her classroom, he cried and cried. He cried so hard that he cried himself to sleep. I cried when I heard this. I was so upset. And I guess there were a couple of other incidents with her that contributed to his being terrified. One was when Jackson first started to have issues after he had his one-on-one aide, Marta. There was one time where he got upset and he hit her. Now, he's 5. He is not really strong. He did hit Marta. Marta took care of it. This teacher, Mrs. Moore, found him later in the day, so several hours later. He went, because they hang their backpacks outside. He was outside either putting something in his backpack or taking something out by himself, and she yelled at him. 5-year-olds don't remember hours and hours later what they did, especially when something as fleeting as I guess he hit her, she dealt with it, and it was done. Like, she doesn't harp. We don't harp. I mean, they're 5. He doesn't remember. And then there have been days, I guess, where she comes into the classroom, again, takes it upon herself, and like one time she wagged her finger in her face, just like, "Are you behave?" And he is terrified of her. So we had an IEP meeting on April 6th, because after I heard that she let him cry himself to sleep. And she didn't think to tell, like, me, didn't think to, like, call the office. That was perfectly acceptable in her eyes. So I went immediately to the vice principal that day, because the vice principal was also awesome. She's amazing. And I told her, this teacher is not to be left alone with Jackson, because the fear is completely unhealthy. So we had an IEP meeting to make it official. And so it wasn't singling out one teacher. We just made a rule that on days where Marta, his aide, is absent, they will find a sub. If there's no sub and it's Angela, his teacher, then it's fine if he is in school. But if they can't find an acceptable sub, or both the aide and the teacher are out for the day, then he is to go to the vice principal and I will pick him up. I said I would rather pick him up than leave him with that teacher. So that was a stipulation now in his IEP. He's not going to be watched by any teacher unless it's an emergency situation. Then obviously she can watch him until I can come get him, but not for an extended period of time. And there was another incident a few weeks ago with a first grade teacher where there was a lot going on in the quad in the school. There was music going on the loudspeaker, a bunch of kids were playing, so their entire class was goofing around. Well, Jackson and a female student were, kind of bouncing around, and they bumped each other. Marta was right there. His aide was right there. She saw the whole thing. They kind of bumped each other, and they both fell down. Well, this first grade teacher saw it, grabbed Jackson by the arm, and yelled at him about it. Why aren't you watching where you're going? Didn't say anything to this girl that was, also bounced. And Marta said that she gripped his arm so hard that for several minutes after she let go, her handprint was on his arm. It didn't leave a bruise. After a few minutes, it was gone. But again, I was livid. And Marta went that day, because I picked Jackson up, because, I also babysit a kindergartner for a friend of mine who's a teacher in the district. So I didn't want to, bring 4 kids into the vice principal's office. So Jackson's, kick-ass aide stayed after school, even after she picked up her kids, to have a meeting with the vice principal to tell her about it. I got a call immediately from the vice principal apologizing. She said, "Erica, I'm so embarrassed. This should never have happened. I'm so sorry. This is taken very seriously." And she really put my mind at ease. And then, so, again, that was very disturbing. The only reason why this first grade teacher would grab his arm and single him out would be if the teachers were talking about Jackson behind his back. Otherwise, she would have either not had a reaction, or she would have spoken to both of them about maybe being careless and needing to be paid attention. Otherwise, there's no reason with his aide right there having the situation under control. There's no reason for her to put her hands on my child. Okay, baby's back asleep. So you can imagine how furious I was to hear that a teacher had done that to Jackson, and that obviously the teachers were talking about Jackson. Now, as his mother, I know Jackson can be a handful, but he's also 5. These are grown women, and they should know better. 1, because they're not allowed to put their hands on students ever, and 2, because they're grown-ups. He's 5. He is still learning. I shouldn't say it's expected, but it's normal. This is what kids do, and especially kids with autism that have these behavior issues. So I found out from Marta that the principal kind of blamed her, saying that she should have taken pictures and she should have taken Jackson right to the office to report it, and that supposedly the teacher doesn't even remember doing it. So I'm thinking to myself, how often does she have to do that to a student, put her hands on a student, for her not to remember a specific incident? So, and Jackson's been doing fantastic in school. He's been keeping his hands to himself. He is terrified of that teacher, Mrs. Moore. Whenever he sees her, he either runs under the table and hides. He just runs, like to the office or somewhere where she isn't. And whenever he does have a prolonged, not interaction necessarily, because she's actually not allowed to talk to him at all. That's like one of the rules. Like, there's no reason for her to talk to him unless it's an emergency. But like if she's in the classroom, because there's a hallway in between her classroom and his classroom, the classroom that he's in, but if he sees her for more than a couple of seconds, he comes home and he says that he has a stomach ache. Not from seeing her, but it's just every single time is when he says he has a stomach ache. One day, she had lunch duty. It was 2 weeks ago. It was Cinco de Mayo. Because I had to pick him up because he said he had diarrhea. And I found out from Marta that she was in the proximity of Jackson. Mrs. Moore was in the proximity of Jackson for the lunch period. And he was so upset that he had diarrhea. And again, he's always having these stomach aches. I have to come pick him up because he has these stomach aches. So I am very upset, obviously. I contacted the program specialist for the elementary schools. Her name is Shannon. And also the head of the special education department for Lake Elsinore Unified School District. And I have a meeting with them next Wednesday. I think it's the 24th, and my husband's going to come. And something needs to be done, because 2 teachers in the span of a few months have done this to Jackson, either got in his face, put their hands on him, and I am convinced that Mrs. Moore has done something else to Jackson that he can't verbalize. There's no reason for him to be that terrified of her unless she were to do something. I don't know what it is because Jackson can't verbalize it, but I think that she may, like, I don't know if she shook him maybe, or if she, like, grabbed his arm, dragged him, I don't know, because I raised my voice at Jackson. I mean, people, like, my husband has raised his voice, my father-in-law, my mother-in-law have all raised our voices at Jackson, and have raised our voices at Jackson, and he's not terrified of us. So there's more to the story, but we can't get it out of Jackson. We've all tried to talk to him, myself, my husband, my dad, I think my mother-in-law. I've tried various ways. Oh, why are you afraid of Mrs. Moore? Tell me about Mrs. Moore. What kinds of things does Mrs. Moore talk to you about? Like, we've tried so many ways of asking him, and he won't talk about it. And when we went to Mommy Muffins, I think 2 weeks ago, my mother-in-law, Jackson, and myself, where you go and you have muffins before school with your child, and the teacher that grabbed his arm, Miss Roberts, was walking across, like, we were walking this way and she was walking this way, and Jackson said, just as if it's completely normal for this to happen, like the sun coming out every day. He's like, oh, that's the teacher that grabs my arm. That's how he thinks of her. That's the only interaction he's ever had with her. And he didn't sound scared. He didn't sound like, oh, you know, I did something wrong, so she retaliated, or, you know, or even that he was scared. It was just, oh, that she grabs my arm. Like, it's normal. Like, oh, yeah, that's what she does. Like, it's okay. So I am very upset. One thing my dad always taught me was take your time, kind of collect yourself, don't have an instant reaction, because if I, as the parent, come at the principal, the vice principal, the school district as a completely crazy person, they're not going to take me seriously. And they're just going to think that I'm this super emotional parent. So everybody, the vice principal, you know, some of the other people that work at the school, they're like, you're always so calm. And that's the reason why, is because my dad always taught me. You know, you kind of have to take emotion out of it. Even though I obviously I have very strong feelings for this, I I don't yell, I don't cuss, I don't even necessarily have a stern voice. I state the facts, and that's what it is. And the facts are my ammo, kind of thing. Like, I don't need to yell. I don't need to bring any emotion. I have the facts. So when I have this meeting with the head of special education next Wednesday, I am going to tell her. I'm going to bring dates. I'm going to bring my data, and I'm going to say this is completely unacceptable. You know, my son should not be this terrified of a teacher. You know, we know of these specific incidents. I think that there's more, and I will seek counseling for him, and if I find out that there's more that this teacher has done to him, it's going to be bad, is all I'm going to say. I'm not in front of the school right now, so I can say with passion, it will be bad. The media will be called. Something will definitely be done if I find out that this teacher has done anything to Jackson other than what I already know, which still isn't okay. And I'm going to tell her I want him to change schools to a slightly better school, and I want the aide, the one-on-one aide that he has now, to travel with us there next year, because she is temporary. She's not, she's like a substitute. And they have her labeled as that because they pay her $3 less an hour. That sucks. It sucks for her. She's fantastic at what she does. So those are going to be my stipulations. Otherwise, I am going to go above her head to wherever I need to go, and I will keep going because I don't feel safe with my son at that school, and I don't feel that if he has a different one-on-one aide that I will get this type of information. The only reason why I know that these incidents happened was because she came and told me. That Mrs. Moore didn't tell anybody, or didn't think to tell me, I should say, that Jackson let him cry himself to sleep. She thought that was acceptable, didn't tell the parent. This woman, you know, this teacher grabbed his arm. She didn't tell anybody about that, but Marta told me about it, and Jackson can't verbalize. So I know that he's terrified of Mrs. Moore, but I wouldn't have known why because he can't verbalize. And that's another thing I'm going to say at the meeting. So, as you can say, I am upset to say the least. So that is what's going on right now. Jackson only has 3 weeks of school left. No, 2 weeks of school left, about. So I want to get this hammered out. And after I have a meeting and I've had time to process, I will make another video. But I just wanted to give you a little update on Jackson and how he's doing at school. So if you have any questions or comments, advice for my upcoming meeting with the head of special education, please put it in the comments down below, and I will let you know how the meeting goes. Have a great day. Bye.